All right, now, when you see your Starlab laptop, it should resemble something very similar to what I've got here showing you. And I'm just going to run through kind of the parts of the Starlab screen. By the way, Crystal, I didn't ask, but do I need to share the various hardware components, the projector, the dome, the fan, and all of that? Did you want me to do some of that?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind. But just so folks will also know this, on our Astronomy Starlab website, we will have links as reminders of how these, how to set these things up. But I think it would be a good idea if you went over it so people can see how these things are interconnected.
Okay, so before I dive into the software, let me share a video and give you a sense of kind of how it looks, how it works, how it's set up, and some advice on that. So what you can see here is this is a video of me setting up my Starlab. I have a bit of an older system. Mine's about 7 years old now. So there's a couple of minor differences to what you're going to be working with. But effectively, you can see this video is only 9 minutes long. So I'm going to have my dome up and running in much less than 9 minutes once you've done it a few times. So first consideration is you want to have a clean floor because you've got an open floor in your Starlab dome. Folks are going to be sitting on the floor. You've also got a nice, beautiful black dome that you don't want to pick up a lot of dust on. So it's a great option to have the floor swept clean before you begin. The floor doesn't need to be hardwood. It can be a carpeted floor, anything like that. The main thing is you've got to have a kind of a solid floor. If you try to set it up on kind of a deck or something that's got holes, gaps in the floorboards, then the floor is not going to hold the air into the dome. So that's important to consider if you're taking it to different places. All right, so here's my Starlab. Here's my gym I'm going to set up in. The other thing is that when you're setting up your dome, you want to think about where the door is going to face, and that sort of controls where the power cords are going to come from. So the way the Starlab is configured, you've got a doorway at the front, and then you've got a blower. This blower I'm just bringing into view keeps the dome inflated. And so it's a great idea to kind of set up the room where the power is coming in from the right-hand side as I'm kind of circling with my mouse. I actually like to operate my Starlab all day long in a stadium chair. I don't know if you've got stadium chairs with your Starlabs, but Starlab sells them. You can also get them elsewhere. This one's nice and padded. It's got arms. Really recommend that. The other thing is that rather than pick up your heavy dome, just tip the bag out. And at the end, when you're putting it away, you just lower the bag onto it and roll it on its back. It's a much easier way of approaching it. Save your wear and tear on your back. Now, my older Starlab has this extra duffel bag that yours won't have. Don't worry about this part. Just get rid of this. So there's the dome. It's got a couple of straps to keep it from kind of falling open. We're just going to loosen those buckles, set the straps aside. And the way I'll teach you to fold up your dome, you'll always know where the door will end up. Because the way I like to do is symmetrical, where the doorway is on the outside of the roll. So I'm going to set up with the doorway ending up right here at this T of these green lines on the basketball court here. So I'm going to unroll this kind of sausage shape that I've put together earlier. And then I'm going to spread the wings out left and right to either side. Now, if you've got a 5-meter dome, the domes come in 5, 6, and 7-meter diameters. My 5-meter dome, that initial fold is just a 50-50. On the bigger 6 and 7-meter domes, it might be 1/3, 1/3, but we'll cover that later on. So I'm just spreading all the material out, and I'm going to generate a big, semicircle of the black fabric on the floor. And as I said, I know that the doorway is right here where I'm circling. So this is where we're going to have the entrance. So I'll just spread this out. Next, you're going to bring your fan over, and there's a black plastic throat that bolts to the mouth of this fan. Once that's firmly attached, then you've got Velcro available to you to Velcro the tube that lets the air from the fan get into the dome. The dome itself has 3 air vents, 1 to let the air in and 2 to let the air out. Plus there's a bonus one that keeps the doorway inflated. As you'll see, the door stays up. So you want it nice and snug, the Velcro around that mouth. then plug in the fan and turn it to high, and that'll begin the process of inflating the dome. So the two vents that let the air out, you want to close them when you put your dome away. That will mean that when you go to set up your Starlab the next time, it'll inflate more efficiently, more quickly. The vent that lets the air in, I leave it open 100% of the time. Also, the door is zipped shut when you put it away. That also keeps the air inside and lets it inflate faster. So once the door jamb fills up with air, you can kind of grab the corner and tip it up. And that kind of nicely allows the rest of the air to fill in the dome behind. Now, because the dome is an open floor, that means that you can actually, if you want to, lift up the sides briefly and say roll wheelchairs into the dome. Just want to make sure that the people in the wheelchairs or their attendants know that there's a projector in the middle of the dome. So when they come rolling in, they don't sail through, they just sort of come in and stop just inside the wall of the dome. So I've had 3 or 4 wheelchairs at once inside my Starlab. It's something that you can certainly do if you encounter that in your presentations. So once I've got the back of the dome filled enough to let the door stay up on its own, then I'm going to walk around and just grab some of the fabric and pull it up, and just to help it spread out a little bit and fill up with air a little bit faster. Now, once the dome is effectively filled up, you might be unhappy with its location or its position. If you want to rotate it or change where the door is, you can simply pick the fan up and walk around, and the dome will follow it on a cushion of air effectively. But once you are satisfied with where you've got your dome positioned, my recommendation is to kind of note the location using some pieces of tape. So if you grab some, say, 2-inch strip of masking tape or painter's tape, grab one of those strips of tape and just tape it on the gym floor inside the dome, right in front of the door. And then another couple of pieces of tape at 45 degrees to the left and the right of the door. That's because, as I said, the dome is a little bit of a floating bubble. And if you've got crowds coming in and out of the dome can actually be pushed out of position from where you initially had it set up. And it's important that it go back to where it was, because you're going to be taking some care to put the lens of the projector in the dead center of the dome. So that kind of gives you a sense of it. And once you can unzip the zipper. So there's both a zipper and a Velcro flap inside the dome that actually kind of seals the zipper and leaves you with an unobstructed surface over the doorway. So that's a kind of a brief introduction. Once you've got the dome inflated, by the way, you can turn the fan to its minimum level and just leave it from there. All right, so we'll circle back, talk a little bit more about the hardware later on. All right, back to the software. So the Starry Night software looks a bit like this on your MacBook and your Windows computer. Across the top, you've got a set of drop-down menus that we're going to dip into a little bit from time to time. Across the whole width of the screen, you've got what I like to call the Doctor Who TARDIS bar, or maybe the Back to the Future DeLorean. It's where you set your space-time coordinate and the rate that time flows. Then below that on the left, you've got a panel that's called the Sky Guide. And the Sky Guide is the repository for all the built-in lessons. By the way, these panels on the left and the right, they're resizable. So you can grab the little handle and change the width of them. So the Sky Guide's on the left. In the center, we have what's called the main window. So the big circular image that you're seeing here represents the picture being displayed in the dome over your heads. The horizon line, where the compass labels are, that image starts about 2 or 2.5 feet or so off the ground surface. That's so that everybody can sit on the floor inside the dome and not have the light from the projector shining in their eyes. The center of the circle obviously would be the peak of the dome straight overhead. So this main window consists of a view of the sky if you're in planetarium mode, or of a piece of space if you happen to be lifted off the Earth, and we'll cover both of that today. It also has a horizon photographic panorama that goes around the edge of the dome. You've got selectable clouds, you've got compass marks, and the compass marks can be changed, their size and their font and their color and all of that. And part of what we'll do during our time together this afternoon is I'll get Crystal to tweak a couple of things that might not be quite optimized yet in your system so that it's all set going forward for you. But look to the lower left, and by the way, this big circular edge of this laptop screen, this is the only part that's seen inside the dome. So if you see any of this other material in the dome itself, it's because those display settings got mixed up and you're using mirrored instead of extended display. So that's your cue, your clue to go back and fix that. So to the lower left of the big main window, you've got a group of numbers and symbols down here that I'm circling with my mouse. You've got a plus and a minus. You've got what I like to call a hamburger menu, those 3 lines, and then field of view indicator. So this is telling me that I'm looking at 190 degrees of the sky, east-west by north-south. So that's meant to be the 180 plus 5 degrees around each edge to give you room for the panorama and the compass marks. The plus and the minus are buttons that you can click on. If I click on the plus, I zoom in and the numbers reduce. And if I click on the minus, it zooms back out. The hamburger menu, if I click that, it pops open and it gives me a number of predetermined amounts that I can zoom in on the sky. So the bottom 3 or 4 numbers would be the entire sky or big sectors of it. The middle range of numbers would be the equivalent of view through binoculars. And then the top few numbers would be the equivalent view through a telescope. Now, these hamburger menus are all over the place. You're going to notice them here and there as you look. To get rid of them, you just click somewhere else and they'll close, or you can hit the escape key on the keyboard and they'll disappear. Now, down the right-hand column, we have what serves as both search panel or control panel. There's a number of different things that you can do in this side panel. And at the top, you've got the search bar. To the left of the search bar, there's one of those hamburgers. And to the left of that, you've got a little trio of icons. And you can see on my laptop screen, I've got a bright one, a dim one, and a bright one. These are toggle switches. And if you click on the bright one, it shuts off. So I can turn on and off the 2 side panels. And I can also display a panel at the bottom called the graphing pane. This graphing pane is time versus the y-axis is something that I'm displaying. In this case, it's the sun and the moon's altitude versus time on a day and night cycle. You can actually increase or decrease the range by clicking the little plus and minus symbols at the left end of this bar. And you can also, if you want to, you can grab this bar and drag it left and right, and it'll change the time in the dome. I don't really operate with it this way, but that's what that tool does. And if you're interested, and by the way, this graphing pane is not seen by anybody in the dome, it's just seen by the teacher. But if you're interested in some other things you can do with this, if you go to the options menu at the top, look down the list for the graph options, and you can see here you're going to have on the MacBook, you're going to see a little blue symbol with 2 arrowheads on it, which means you can pop that open. And you could graph the separation between 2 objects in the sky, you know, the angle between them over time, how high they are over time, which is what I'm doing right now, the brightness or magnitude of an object over time, its distance away from you, its angle from the sun, which is elongation, and its angular size or diameter in a telescope or binoculars. So it's something kind of advanced that most people don't use, but that's what that does. So if you ever get in your dome and you ever fire up your software and you're not seeing the sky guide and the search panel, just check this little trio of icons and make sure that it's bright, dim, and bright. All right, so let's break down a little bit about what's over here on this panel, because this is kind of where the meat of the action is. When you're not using the built-in lessons, the rest of the time, you're going to be working with this panel on the right-hand side. So as long as there's nothing in the search bar, because this panel will change according to what's in the search bar, as long as the search bar is empty, you're going to have 3 main headings down the side here. And each heading has an arrow pointing to it. That arrow is just a way of opening and closing the contents of this heading. So if I click on the little arrow pointing to Explore Starry Night, it pops open and now the arrow points down. Each of these lines here is a menu. So there's a whole menu for constellations, a whole menu for options, a whole menu for Messier objects, and so on. We don't need to know very many of these, but there are 2 or 3 that you're going to need to use from time to time. So I'm just going to, when I operate, I just leave this open like this. Next up, we've got today's sky. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to ask Crystal a question. Crystal, what sort of a panorama have you got around the edge?
What sort of, oh, on mine, it's
Yeah.
just, oh, yes, it's just navy blue
Okay.
with the directionals.
Let's make this better. So here's another neat thing you can do when you're Starlab. Now you can see at the top here, my Starlab is telling me that I'm near Charleston, US. So the folks in the factory, they put in your zip code into the software. And when it says near Charleston, it's actually saying it's your zip code. So we're showing the accurate sky over your location. But hey, it may not look like Charleston or the university. So let's fix that. You go on over to this under Explore Starry Night and look down a little bit to change your horizon scenery and click on that. It's going to open up an index of thumbnails, all alphabetized with names. And when you click on a thumbnail, it instantly paints that panorama around the dome. So this is fun. You know, I'll tease the students. I'll say, hey, I want to look at Mercury, which is just above the horizon. And then I'll click on the castle and everybody will laugh at me because they know that you can't see Mercury in a castle. But I'm actually not changing my sky location. I'm still where I was. I'm just cosmetically changing the appearance in the dome. So what I'm going to get Crystal to do is go down this list a little bit. The one I kind of guessed as a good one that you can use as your everyday panorama was the lake. So if you go down to the L and click lake, that'll paint around the dome for you on your laptop. Let me know when you've done that.
Oh, yeah, I had muted. Yeah, I've got it. Thank you.
Okay. And if you keep on going down to the very bottom, you're going to see there's a set of cloud types you can have as well. So, and we're going to use this when we go to Mars, but for now I just picked Cumulus and I use that as my default. So let me know, Crystal, when you've got that.
Oh, yeah, you do. There, yep, I see it. Yeah, that is
You're,
cool.
you're good?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna take the horizon panoramas out of the search. On the MacBook, there's a little there's a little white X that you can just click the X and that'll clean out the search bar. So I've done that. Now I'm going to ask you next, Crystal, about the compass marks. What color are they? Are they legible? Can you see them well enough?
No, they're blue, so they
All right.
blend into the green
So
background.
we're gonna fix this. It's kind of a one-time thing, but if it ever gets changed, you'll know how to put it back. So under this menu, you're going to click on the word options.
Mhm.
And you're going to see a list of subcategories for the kinds of options you can work with. And you want to look for the one that says local view and click its arrow to expand it.
Mhm.
And when you see that, you're going to see a set of entries in here. And these are switches. So when they're blue, they're active. And when they're gray, they're turned off. So for example, just for fun, I could turn off the daylight.
Mhm.
Right, and turn it back on using that switch as an example. But I'm going to get you to go down to where it says local horizon and
Mhm.
just click on that. And
Mhm.
that'll open up a control panel. Looks like maybe a little bit different on the MacBook, but it's basically the same thing. And if you go down this list to the bottom, you can see the word font. Can you see it?
Mhm.
So click that button, click that font, and then you're going to pick now on the laptop, you're going to see the ability to change the font type, its characteristic, its number or size. I'm using 16. If you want to pick 16, that's probably a good number.
Okay.
And the coloring scheme on the MacBook's a little different. I'm just going to pop open my alternate view here. There we go. So on the MacBook, on this font box that pops up, can you see a gear in the upper left corner?
Yes.
So click beside the gear. That'll pop open and you've got the word color pops up. You can choose color.
Yes.
And when you choose color, you're going to see a set of coloring tools that you can choose from. In
Yes.
my case, I'm going to suggest you can use the colored pencils or the wheel, whatever it is. I'm going to suggest yellow as the color because that yellow color works well for daytime and nighttime.
I have it changed.
You got that changed. When you've got it changed, you can go ahead and click the little red X that the MacBook uses to close a window.
Mhm.
And then you can click OK and close this whole big box.
Oh, good. Cool.
right? Now, that'll change your appearance on your lap, but in order to remember that, we need to lock in that change we made. So I'm going to have you to go up to the word options, look down for where it says save current options as default, and click there. And then confirm with the save.
Oh, that was rather quick.
Yeah. So now whenever you open up the software, it'll already remember that and come up with this panorama and those color labels. If it ever gets changed, you can go through this process and revert back to them. Now I'm gonna share with you a super secret extra bonus feature of Starry Night that I think you'll find really fun. So if you go into that local horizon again on the right and open it up, and look down the list, and you can see that there's a button called Document. Can you see that button?
Yes.
Click it, and this is going to open up a list of thumbnails again. But look what's in here. You've got all the Apollo landing site panoramas. You've got all kinds of alien exoplanet. You've got Phobos and Deimos. You've got the pyramids of Egypt. You've got cold Jovian and hot Jupiter planets, all kinds of things that you could simulate in the Starlab if you wanted to create some new scenes. Here's Florence, Italy, for example. So you get more in this list than you do in that standard list off to the side. So if you ever want to sort of dive in a little deeper, you might even find in here something that's even more perfect for the university than the lake one that we chose. Anyway, to pick one, you just click any one of these and select it, and it'll change into that panorama. I'm going to click cancel just to undo all that. So that's kind of an extra bonus thing that I don't show most people, but you're special. All right.
Okay.
Next up. All right, going down this list below the Explore Starry Night, we've got a heading called Today's Sky. And if you open that one up, you're going to see a list of celestial events that are happening today. So if you mouse over them, they get bright. So if I want to say, show me Venus at its highest point, I'll click on that, and the dome will display that event at whatever particular time that was. And it's actually labeling Venus for me. Or if I wanted to say, when is the moon at its highest point, that happens to be at night, 1:50 a.m. or sunrise. So I really don't use this option very much, but they will change basically every day according to what's going on in the sky. And in order to kind of revert back to where you started and get rid of the scenario that you just clicked on, you're going to go up to the upper left corner and look for the word home, H-O-M-E. Click on that. And that word home sets the software back up to its boot up configuration. So whenever you use Starry Night, it'll come up with your base location, all the settings that you've saved, and the current date and time. So it set me back to 1:40 p.m. And if you ever want to experiment with different settings or things or tweak the software and you get confused or lost or not sure what you're doing, just kind of abort and click home, and it'll unwind anything that you may have done, as long as you haven't done the options save as default step yet. So when I'm using the software, I typically collapse that Today's Sky. Below that, we've got one called our solar system, and this is a really handy one. So this has got a hierarchical index of the contents of our solar system from the sun on out. You can see that some of the labels are white and some of the labels are gray. The ones that are white are above the horizon, and the ones that are gray are below the horizon. Now, it happens that we're entering into a period where we're not going to really have many planets in the night sky because they're all kind of a bit close to the sun right now. So I can tell from this right now already that Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are all above the horizon right now in the daytime sky. If some of them were below the horizon, they'd be gray. But for every object in this list, you've got its name, you've got a box beside it, and you've got a hamburger. The hamburger we're going to open up in a minute, and that lets us manipulate that object. If it's an object that has, sub-objects, like Mars has moons, so Mars actually has a submenu that I can open up that reveals Phobos and Deimos. Or if I go down to Jupiter, I can show Jupiter's Galilean moons and then a list of the smaller moons of Jupiter, any one of which I can work with in the software. If you're looking for Pluto, Pluto's down here under the dwarf planet section. There's Pluto down there. There's also a long list of comets, other asteroids, and space missions in here as well. So this is a really interesting index. Now, if you've got this column wide enough, you're going to see a set of circles down the right-hand side. And when you click on a circle, it draws that object's orbit across the sky. I don't know if you can see too easily, but I've got a little reddish arc of Mercury's orbit showing in the sky right now. We'll come back and use that in a little while. All right, so Chris, how can we work with objects and get information and start having some fun here? First off, when I'm mousing around the sky, you can see that most of the time my cursor is a white glove. This is called the hand mode of the cursor. And the hand actually lets you grip the sky and move it. So if you're viewing the entire dome of the sky, all you're going to do by moving the hand is rotate the dome. So I can click and drag and rotate and look in any direction. Crystal, have you got south at the bottom by default?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Do I have what?
Yeah, if you click on the home button at the upper left, is south at the bottom of your circle?
If I click at home on the bottom left is.
Click on the word home at the upper left.
I already did. What am I looking for at the bottom?
So look at the compass marks and tell me is south at the bottom.
Yeah.
Perfect. You want south at the bottom by default because that's where, when you're teaching in the dome, this part of the dome is going to be where you're facing as the teacher presenter. So you want the southern sky because that's where the sun, moon, and planets are going to be hanging out most of the time. So yeah, so that's what this cursor does. It lets you drag the scene around and reorient the dome. Now, obviously, if you're presenting to people, you want to be a little gentle about spinning the dome around because you can get people dizzy, if you don't kind of go a little bit gentle on that. All right. Now, I'm going to give you one other thing I haven't mentioned yet for those of you who might be using the Starlab for a bit more advanced topics. If you go up to the menu that says File on the MacBook, pop it open, you've got an option to export sky view. And if you put the cursor on those words, a menu appears on the right. So as image means you can capture a thumbnail or a view, a full JPEG or PNG image of whatever you're currently displaying in the dome. So if you wanted to make a teaching guide or a brochure or a some lesson plan, you could capture the scenes in the dome as you go through the various steps of your lesson or presentation. So if you click as image, it's going to ask you for a name. I'm just going to use the default name and click save. And that's then stored on your Starlab laptop. I'll show you where those are in a little while. Also, if you go File, Export Sky View as Video, ask you for the name of a movie, which I'll just say save. And now I've got a record button at the bottom and a stop button at the bottom. If I click record, then whatever I do in the dome, it's going to record the visuals as a full dome movie. So you could take that full dome movie, you could press stop and that'll get saved. You could take that full dome visual movie of what you just did in the dome. You could have recorded your voice on another app. You could splice them together and produce a whole push and leave and make your dome, your Starlab into a kind of a theater where you just have somebody watching the presentation and hearing the voice. Or you could add music, or you could add an alternate language version of the lesson. So that's kind of a great tool to have as well.
May I interrupt Chris for just a moment? And
Sure.
just as an educator, and I'm sure that there's probably a lot of educators wondering the same thing. We have one, obviously we have the two labs, and then Starlab sent us the two MacBooks with the software on it. Now you're giving us a lot of great options as educators to create lessons and workbooks and things of that nature. But we only have one laptop. So is there a way or a means to where educators could get on the software independent of this MacBook and plan out their lessons?
Yeah, so there's really kind of a couple of options you could consider. And then at different levels of expense, if you like. So you could check with Starlab to see how many licenses you own, because in some cases you do get multiple licenses or more than one license with a single Starlab system, which would allow you to, in theory, install the software on a second computer, a third, or an additional computer. So you need to check with Starlab on that. So there's that. Then you could also ask them, if not, then can we purchase additional licenses, which I know they can do for you. And you could install those on as whatever laptops you would like to equip. Or the Starry Night small dome software I'm showing you is an offshoot of a desktop program called Starry Night. And it wouldn't be identical, it would be similar to this, but you could do practice and a bit of development work on the Starry Night classroom version of the software. And you could just put the material you created on a thumb drive and copy it onto your Starlab laptop. So that's another way of doing it as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, because the one thing, and obviously there were certain things I didn't know what to expect, and I'm sure some of our educators are in the same thing. Is how do we get in there before we actually, because we share the lab with the educators that's on board here today taking the training. We have two labs, and of course Todd has his lab up in the north of the state, and so we're sharing these labs with a lot of different educators, and as you know, they're going to want time to be able to get on the software and work and plan their lessons and things of that nature. So we do want to make sure we have a way or a means that they can do that. So just to repeat for my sake as well, and I'm sure just for the educators, you're telling us that there is a Starry Night desktop version that we can download online and kind of work with it and then upload it when we get the Starlab computer.
Yeah, so you could go back to your salesperson at Starlab and they could arrange for you to purchase, however many desktop classroom versions you wanted. That's much less expensive than the planetarium version.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, great question. Thank you. All right, back to the lesson here. So I've talked about this hand cursor. If I mouse around the sky, though, if I point at something like the sun, then my cursor turns into an arrowhead. And the arrow cursor is something that lets you work with objects and identify them. And so you can actually notice that I can get the arrow to show up here and there without anything necessarily visible in the sky, because the software knows that there's a planet there in the sky beside the sun, for example. But if I point at the sun and I click, then the sun's label gets shown on the dome, and the check mark gets put on beside the sun in the index. So you can point at anything you see in the sky and click on it and identify it. Could be a star, could be a constellation, could be a planet or a moon or something like that. Now, if you want to, work with the sun, there's a couple of things you can do. First of all, if you point at an object and you hold the control key on the keyboard, it'll bring up facts and figures about that object as long as you're holding the key down. And this is where I'm going to share my other screen and show you what it looks like on the dome, which is nicer looking. So now I'm sharing my dome. And if I go back to the sun on the laptop and I press control, get a nice red bullseye around the object, and you get some nice, easy to read curved labels that show you things like how far away it is, how bright it is. And there's actually a whole list of choices that you can choose from. If you wanted at the bottom, might not be able to see it. You've got the spectral class and the temperature and things like that are visible as well. So you can let me know if you need any assistance with that later, but for today, we'll just kind of mention that that's available. Or I can go over to the sun index here on the right. I can click on that hamburger. And that hamburger is going to open up a tool that lets me choose amongst a number of different things to do with that object. For example, I can go down to the audio description.
The sun is the center of our entire life and experience. Without it, the Earth would be as sterile as the moon.
There's actually a stop audio button in the lower right corner that if you click that, he'll stop talking. So that gentleman will spend a minute or two or three talking about every major object in the software, all the bright stars, the sun, planets, moon, the constellations, major deep sky objects, those audio descriptions are available. You've also got pronounce.
Sun.
So sun, moon, earth, no big deal. But what about camelopardalis? Or, you know, some strange star name that you may not have heard of or know of. So you can get the pronunciation of things like that. Also with this menu, we can do things like center the object. So center the object means take it from wherever it is in the dome and put it in front of me, the teacher, which means basically putting it above the bottom of the circle. Once an object has been centered, if you zoom in on it, and by the way, I like to operate my Starlab with a mouse. My mouse has a wheel, and rolling the wheel is the equivalent to clicking the plus and minus buttons down below here. So I can just use the wheel to roll in, to zoom in. So as long as I've got the object centered, it will not drift out of view when I zoom in on it. So I can zoom in and I can zoom out. If I actually zoom in, if I go back to home and put the sun out of the center and I use the zoom button to zoom in, see how the sun leaves the picture after a minute? I can use my hand to drag it into the middle again, though. That's another tool, another use of the hand tool is to drag things and recenter them and manipulate them. All right, what else can I do? If I go back to home, I can ask to magnify. So if I ask to magnify any object, could be a star, could be a constellation, it'll center it and then zoom in on it. And depending on the amount of zooming in it is, I can use the plus and minus to increase or decrease the size of the object. All right, so that's great. One more thing, I can also show info. If I click on show info, it brings up a dialog box of information on the Starlab laptop. And there are 5 tabs of information down the left here. So the general information tab is going to give me its database name and type, how bright it is, when it rises and sets, radius and mass. This information is going to vary depending on the type of object. So if it's a star, you're going to get spectral class and temperature. If it's a planet, you won't. Or if it's a galaxy, you'll get other things. If you go to the second line, the description, you're going to see a lot of stories about the objects, sort of historical background. There's lots to read there. Position in sky. Oops, this looks blank. Because I just scrolled down, I need to scroll back up. Now you're going to get its sky coordinates. Position in space will give you its distance away. Other data will be things like spectral class, apparent diameter, length of its day, and so on. When you're done with this box, you just click the X and it'll go away. Last up, any of these menus, any of these hamburgers, you can click and ask to go there. So the Starry Night program is not just a planetarium, it's a virtual universe. You can leave the Earth and go traveling through space, visit the different places. So I'm going to take us on a trip to the sun. And now it's going to report to me that I'm no longer on Earth. I'm now 0.019 astronomical units from the sun, or about 5% of the Earth-sun distance away. Now, from this point, if I wanted to make the sun bigger or smaller, I could use the zoom buttons as I did before. But I've also got another option. Beside the location, I've got an up and a down arrow. I like to call these the elevator buttons because if I click the down elevator button, it flies me closer to the object. And if I click the up elevator button, it flies me farther away. Now, because you're dealing with a dome, a fisheye lens, when you fly closer to objects, they can get distorted. That's particularly true of Saturn, for example. So in that case, I typically end up using the plus and minus instead of the flying closer and farther. But you'll find uses for the elevators here, and I'll show you one of them in a second. Okay, what else? I haven't talked about annotating the sky very much yet. So this works whether you're on the ground or whether you're in space. If you go up to the labels menu and pop it open, you can see a list of all the objects in the software: planets, moons, comets, satellites, and so on. Anything in this list that has a check mark to the left of it, those labels will be displayed on the dome. Well, right now I don't have anything checked, so I don't have any labels. But if I wanted to see the planets and moons, I can just click on those words and the planets and moons will show up on the sky. This could be on the ground. This can be in space. I happen to be in space at the moment. If I want to make the labels disappear or add more labels, I could click on stars. Typically, they're all different color sets. And if I want to get rid of them again, I could go back and click them again, and that'll toggle them back off. I'm going to leave the planets turned on for a second. The other neat thing is that if you press the letter K on the keyboard, it brings up the constellations, the lines on the labels, and I can just toggle them on and off. I also have the ability to turn on the constellations using the View menu. If I open that up and you look down the list to where it says Constellations, then you've got a list opens up on the right, and anything with a check mark will be displayed. So you can see here, I can show the boundaries of the constellations. I can show their labels, their drawings. So if I were to say, click astronomical, it's going to show me the 88 standard constellations. Or I could click on View Constellation Zodiac, just get the Zodiac, or View Constellation, let's say Chinese Sky, Chinese constellations, or View Constellation Burong, which is Aboriginal. And you can even add your own constellation. So I've started to build the Navajo, and it's basically connect the dots. The Navajo constellation is really what we call Orion. I'm going to just go back to View Constellation Astronomical, and I'll just show you for good measure the artwork. So if I'm in the dome, especially with young people or families, you know, I like to bring up the night sky with the constellations, and I'll bring up all the artwork, and everybody will get really excited about all the animals and things like that they can see. So I'm just going to turn those off. We'll leave the constellations here for a second. Now, I'm going to magnify the sun here, and I'm going to show you one of the other really great features of the software is that if I put my cursor on the sun now, it changes shape. It changes into a new shape we haven't seen. It's a 4-pointed star. This is called the location scroller cursor. If I click and drag, I can reorient the object. So all the stars, planets, moons are all three-dimensional entities that you can roll around and view them from different angles. All the spacecraft in the software are the same. You've got the space station, the Hubble Space Telescope, and some of the Apollo missions are in here. So I can view from different angles. I can roll this around and look for wherever Earth is. Not sure what direction Earth is at the moment, but we could find it. There's Earth off in the distance. Another nice thing you can do is if you mouse over the sun here and you right click, you get that same menu. So when you point at something in the sky and you right click, you get that same menu that you get when you're using the hamburger over on the right hand index. So if I go to the sun's index here on the right, I go down the list and look for surface image model and mouse over that. So most entities in the software have alternate views or skins for them. So for the sun, I've got this yellowish sun that we're looking at. I can change this to actual color. That'll make it white with some sunspots on it. Or I could say, surface image model, show me the sun in hydrogen alpha. That's the where I can see the structure of the sun's surface, the plages and filaments and so on, sunspots. Or I could ask for the sun in other wavelengths like the calcium, which is purple, and the iron, which is the green and the blue. So those are available to you. For the planets, you've got alternate views of the planet surfaces, including the Earth. So we'll come back to that in a minute. I'm just going to set this back to the default, and I'm going to zoom out. And we're going to make an experience that Crystal can save on your Starlab laptop and use later. So we're going to use the up elevator button to leave the solar system behind. The farther I get away, the planets will all recede into the distance with the sun. I'm actually just going to go over and click on the sun in the box just to keep the sun labeled because it's going to disappear when we get farther from it. As I get farther using the up elevator button, I leave the solar system, the sun will get smaller and smaller. Then the constellations will begin to warp because the constellations are made of lines that we've connected different stars together, and those stars tend to be the ones closer to the sun. So the constellation lines will all converge towards the sun here as we leave the solar system. Kind of a virtual starship. I'm going to actually go up to the view constellations and just turn off the astronomical and make those lines disappear. All right, let's keep flying away. At some point, we're going to get the whole Milky Way showing up. So Crystal, have you got let me know when you've got kind of that same distance and situation, roughly.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now we're going to go to your menu on the right and click the hamburger for the sun and center it. That's going to lock it into the middle. Got it?
Yes.
All right. Then we're going to go up to this picture of this little hand beside the word home and click on that. And that actually opens up a list of the available cursors. Because there's a check mark beside adaptive, the software is working in this default mode where it says, okay, sometimes I'm a hand, sometimes I'm an arrow, sometimes I'm the location scroller. But you can actually force it to stay in one mode. And I'm going to get you, Crystal, to choose location scroller. Click on that. Got it?
Yes.
Now, if you click and drag, the galaxy is a three-dimensional object. You can see where the sun is in it. You can mouse around and find the Magellanic Clouds. And you can see all of these other dots in the background. Those are other galaxies. Those aren't stars. So simulation like this is a great one to come back and use again and again. So I'm going to get you to save this. So if you kind of make it so that the galaxy's face on with the sun's position easily identified, then you're going to go up to the word favorites and click that open and ask to save favorite. And what acronym can we use for the school? Just the 3 letters or 4 letters, like VWSU?
WVSU.
WVSU. If we use this all the time, then we'll be able to find these a little bit easier, although it's not required. So I'm going to say VWSU views the whole Milky Way. So this is an example of how you can use your Starlab tools to create new experiences and new media in your Starlab. Once you've got it typed in, click OK, and that's been saved. I'll show you how to find that in a second. So Crystal, let me know when you've got that done.
Done.
All right. Now I'm gonna move this around so that the sun is edge onto the galaxy. Just so I like that. And then we're going to use the up elevator button to leave and keep flying. So the galaxy will shrink, the dome will fill with dots, and every single dot is another galaxy in the database, all at different distances and directions from our galaxy and our solar system. And when you get to about, you can see the distance at the top's increasing. When I get to about 2,000 million light years from the sun, then I produce this butterfly shape. The butterfly shape is a function of the fact that the galaxies that should be filling in the void on this map are invisible to us from Earth because they're blocked by our Milky Way in the sky. So it kind of produces this observational bias. Now, because my cursor is still in this location scroller mode with the sun in the middle, I can mouse around and view this model from different angles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm going to get you to save this one too. Favorites, save favorite. Now we're going to say new favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to go WVSU at the edge of the universe. And say okay. All right, so you might say, Chris, all right, that's mildly interesting, but what's so good about that? Here's where the real fun comes in. You see the hamburger beside the elevator buttons. If you click on that, this is where the tool you use to change your location from where you're viewing the universe. And the first entry in this list says view from near Charleston, US. The second one is the same, but with default options. And then there's some others below. We'll come back to those. The default options one would be the same as me clicking the home button. That's just going to transform my view from the edge of the universe back to looking up at the blue sky in Charleston. That's no fun. What we want to do is we want to do some traveling. So if I get you to mouse over and click the first one, that's going to take us from here back to Earth and land us at the university in about 20 seconds. So in the dome, this is really fun. And then in a minute, I'm going to get you to go in and add some additional features to this trip and make it even more impactful and interesting. And you can actually, and we'll save it so you've got this available to you anytime. So let me know when yours lands, and then we'll get you to tweak a few things.
It's almost there. I can see the sun. We're about 30, 20. I mean, we're really going. The sun's coming, moving. I think we're going towards Earth now. You're a little ahead of mine.
That's all right.
Yeah, I see Earth coming.
All right.
And
All right. So when you're on the ground again,
mhm.
I'm going to get you to click the home button. And that takes us back to where we started. And then I'll show you how to find these.
Okay, click
So you go up to the search bar and you just put in, I would use lowercase letters, WVSU. And this is going to give you a list of everything in the software with those letters in it. Now, if you had a galaxy or a nebula with that name, then that would come up under sky objects, but it's not. There isn't. So instead, you've got favorites, and then you've got user favorites, and you might have to click to expand that list. And now you're going to see the two creations that we made.
correct.
Do you
I
see
did.
them?
Yes.
All you need to do is point at one and click it. View the whole Milky Way, click. There you are back in business and able to teach with this simulation. Or if you want to go to the edge of the universe, point to that one and click that one, and you're back there again. So you can actually create these. You can create folders and organize them by different topics or grade levels or instructors, and have a whole library of your own neat content in the Starlab. Was that a question?
Yeah, I apologize, Chris. Yes, it was. Where you have shown where the user favorites is, and we can see the two that we just created. If we have an educator who has saved a few favorites and at the end decides, well, I want to either rename them or delete them, how do they do that?
Yeah. So the nice thing about this list, and there's actually a couple of ways of getting at it. This is the one we've done so far. If you point at either of these titles and right click instead of left click, open file means show it to me on the dome. You can edit the name or delete the name, but my favorite way is to reveal file. Reveal file shows you where it is on the laptop. So there's a folder on the laptop, on the MacBook. This is also where I captured that screenshot of the dome. This is also where I captured that movie of the dome. And you can use this MacBook file manager to make a new folder, call this crystal stuff. Right? And that'll show up in the index later on when we use that. And we could take this and we could copy it in there. So I've got a version here and I've got another version in your folder. So when you're ready, you can close this off, and I'll show you how that working here in another minute. But for now, what I'm going to get you to do is beef up, add some flavor and some juice to this views the universe one. So go ahead and right click it and say open. And that'll launch it. And then I'm going to have you erase what's in the search bar and then go down the list and add the orbits in the little circles for the solar system. Let me know when you've gotten to that.
Okay. Yeah, just so you know, we'll have to talk about this later. The user favorites, right click does not open anything up. There's nothing comes up. But we can talk about that later and get that corrected.
Sure.
Okay.
So we got that. Also, let's add Pluto for fun. Pluto's orbit. We'll open that one up. And then we're going to open the comet list and scroll down until we get to the letter B. And you should see a few named Borisov, Borsiov. See them?
Yes.
So there's one with the bracket 2I. Let's put that one on. So Borisov 2I is the interstellar comet that astronomers think came from another star system and zipped through our solar system a few years ago. So it has a kind of a hyperbolic or parabolic trajectory to it, orbit. Then we're going to go down further and we're going to look for Churyumov-Gerasimenko 67P and put its orbit. That's the comet that the Rosetta spacecraft landed on. You with me?
Yes, I'm listening. You go right ahead.
Okay. Then we're going to go down to and add Halley's Comet as well. Put that one on. And then we'll close this list.
Unfortunately, I can click the square box, but I can't click the circular box to create the arrows. I have a setting that's not right somewhere.
Do you see the circles themselves?
Yeah, I can see the circles, but they won't.
Oh, okay.
Nothing I can
Well,
do.
I'll carry on here as I
You go
was.
ahead.
You can recreate this later and then we can have a break at some point. Maybe we can restart your program and hopefully that'll fix it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just let me finish the thought with everybody and show you what's possible. So Crystal, from this point, no need to keep along. I'll just sort of demonstrate and then you guys can replicate this later back home, back at your on your laptop. So I've added all the comets. I've added the comets. I've added the planet orbits. I'm going to go to View, Solar System. Actually, I'm going to go to Labels. I'm going to add the, let's see, I'm going to add the space mission labels. I'm going to add the star labels. I'm going to go to Options, Solar System, Asteroids. And this is actually a slider that lets you make the asteroids brighter. So I'm going to pull that to the right and make them bright and say, okay. And then I'm going to do that under Options, Solar System, Satellites. I'm going to make the satellites brighter as well and say, okay. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to go Favorites, Save, Replace. So I'm going to change what I did have with my new and improved version. Okay, and let me deal with the chat here. Get rid of that. Now we'll fly home. And the nice thing about this experience, once you've created it on your laptop, is you can interrupt the trip at any point you want, examine what you've made, look at it from different angles, and then resume the journey. So I'll show you how I do that. So I've just got my mouse over the elevator buttons. I'm just gonna, here we go. I'm gonna interrupt. So I'm gonna manually go a little bit smaller. So you can see I've got the Pioneer 10 and 11, the Voyager 1 and 2, and the New Horizons spacecraft on here. I've got this model solar system that I can look at from different angles. This funny line here, that's the comet Borisov. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Here we go. I've also got these ellipses for Halley's Comet and Comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko. And then we'll continue the trip. So we've got the asteroid belt. And then as we get closer to the Earth, we've brightened up the satellites to make them little white dots swarming around the Earth. Right, and then I click on home just to get rid of that. Okay, let's talk about setting the date and time. And to do that, we can click on any of the parameters that describe the date and time. So if I click on the month, it gets underlined. I could click on the hour, it gets underlined. And once it's underlined, it's adjustable. So if I'm going to click on February, once it's underlined, from that point, if I use the up and the down arrows on the keyboard, it'll increment or decrement by month. So I can do February, March, April, May, June. I can even draw the analemma pattern of the sun on the sky by holding down the keys. To get back to now, I can click on the hamburger in front of the date and choose now, and that'll set it back to now. Also, once February is underlined, I could also type in a number like 9 for September or 2 for February. Same with the day of the month, I could overtype that or use the up and down arrows. For the year, I could type in the year. Let's say I put the year 44. Let's say I want to see the sky on the Ides of March when Julius Caesar was murdered. I could set the date to 15th of March of the year 44 and click the CE and it becomes BCE. So now I've marked 44th BC. And then I could click, I can go into the night sky by changing the 3 o'clock to say 8 o'clock. Bring up the night sky and use the letter K to bring up the constellations. But you say, wait, Chris, Caesar wasn't murdered in the United States. He was murdered in Rome. All right, let's go to Rome. So we click on the hamburger. We click view from ... And now we have a list of places we can visit. And if I type in Rome, I can choose it from the list. Click view from selected location. The software will fly me and land me in Rome. Don't mind the city lights. They didn't have those in 44 BC either. Now, obviously, the constellations wouldn't be a lot different than they are here in the year 2024. But if I were to say, take the year and make that the year 90,000 or 9,000, then they would be a lot different because the stars jiggle over time and produce different patterns in the sky. Again, I can go back to now, or I can use the home button to bring me back home. So that's an example of traveling with this Starlab. All right, so time of day, you can click on the hour, you can increment from 2 p.m. to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and do it that way. You could bring up the constellations. We've already worked a little bit with those. The other thing you can do is, I mentioned that you can point at things in the sky and identify them. You can do that with constellations. So for example, I see Orion stars here in the dome. I usually like to bring people into the dome with nothing labeled and see if they recognize anything. But if somebody says, oh, isn't that Orion? I can actually mouse around that patch of the sky and right click and use select other and choose Orion. And that'll reveal Orion just alone. Now on your laptop, this has probably not been set up to show you the artwork. And we can do that in a second if that's something you want to add on. If you want to choose a different constellation like Taurus beside it, I can right click, select other and choose Taurus. If I want to keep all the constellations I'm selecting, maybe I want to tell a story, I can use the shift key. So in Starry Night, if you use the shift key, you can just additively add to the number of objects. There's Orion. I could add Gemini. I could add select other Auriga. I could add Ursa Major here and do it that way. And I can also still use the letter K and bring up the rest of the constellations. To uncheck something, you can either click on something new and they'll all be replaced, or you can use the Edit Select None tool to unselect everything. Any questions on any of that so far? The other thing you can do is if you click on the PM, it switches to AM. So AM and PM just toggle by 12 hours back and forth. Now you're not limited. I'll go back to home here. You're not limited to time running at the real rate of 1 second per second. If you go on up to the upper right corner in front of the search bar here, there's a set of media player buttons. The right pointing arrow is white. The others are grayed out. And the white arrow to the right indicates that the seconds are counting up in real time, 1 second per second. I can pause time by clicking the box. I could run time in reverse so the seconds count down. Or I could use the outer two icons to step forward manually one by one. If I click the run time forward button, now I can also speed time up because the 1x is the controller. If I click on the 1 and make that 600, now the sun is drifting faster across the sky. And to get back to normal, I could use the hamburger to go back to 1x, or I could use some preset amounts. And if you are teaching the upper grades or want to deal with some more advanced topics, you can set the units of time to these other advanced topics like sidereal days and months and so on. I see there's something in the chat. What's that?
It was just Helen just pointing out that MacBook clicks are different than window-based ones.
Yeah, on the MacBook, right click is 2 fingers and left click is 1 finger. That's one of the main differences. All right. So now you're masters of time and you're nearly masters of space. We'll do one more thing and then we're ready to tackle the lessons. So going back to the hamburger in front of the elevator buttons, another option you've got is radius times 2 times 4 times 8. If you click on radius times 2, it's going to lift you straight up off the surface of the Earth and hover over the Earth's surface. I'm actually going to zoom in on the Earth to make it bigger. As before, I can roll the Earth around. And I've also got, of course, all the alternate skins available to me, which I can get by either right-clicking on the Earth itself and going to Surface Image Model, or I could click on the Earth's hamburger and go to its surface image model. And I've got things in here like the city lights at night. I've got a light pollution map. I've got major weather systems and ocean currents and alternate views of the Earth. And one of my favorites is the natural Earth. Another tool that you've got available to you for any object that has named locations on its surface, including the moon and Mars and places like that, you can open up the menu and look for markers and outlines. And that's going to bring up a box that you can expand. And you can actually search for places on that object. So if I type in, say, Charleston, I can put a check mark and I can identify where that is on the map. Or you could, if you were dealing with the moon, you could type in the word Apollo and all the Apollo sites would show up and you could check them all or uncheck them all. So that's a fun tool. Another great tool you can use the view from for, you're not limited to viewing the sky from the surface of the Earth. On the MacBook, you're going to see a little double arrow blue symbol here. You can view the sky from the surface of the sun or Mercury or Mars or any of these places all the way up to Pluto and beyond. So if I were to say, take me to Mars, now I've got Martian places. I've got a map. I could drop a pin on Mars. I could type Martian latitude, longitude. No sense typing a zip code in, obviously. No zip codes yet. But if I were to say go Gale Crater, that's where the Curiosity rover is exploring. Click on Gale and view from selected location. No matter where I am, it could have started on the ground, but I happen to be starting in space. It's going to fly me to Mars and land me there. Now, the great thing about being able to save favorites is that if you don't want to do these trips with the students, or even if you're not really a fan of motion in the dome, you could just go ahead and save the destination and bring it up with one click and not do the traveling. I like to travel around most of the time. Everyone in the dome is excited to do the traveling. Now, a quirk of the software is when you land on Mars, it's still going to look like West Virginia. So we're going to need to go to the change your horizon scenery and choose one of the Martian panoramas that's now popping up. So one of the fun things I like to do is land on Mars, bring up the planets and moon labels. I'm just going to drag those down kind of here. So there's the Earth as viewed from Mars. Mars doesn't have clouds like this. So I'm going to go down and choose the hazy clouds. And I'm going to go to my time and I'm going to speed it up to say 300 and favorites, save a new favorite. And we'll call this West Virginia State University lands on Mars. And if you do this later, you'll have this on your laptop as well. All right, last up, if I say view from again, instead of the surface of a place, I can choose moving with or hovering over. If I do moving with, say, Saturn, I could be on the orbital plane above or below or on the sun or dark side. I'm just going to choose sun side and view from there. It's going to travel me to Saturn. I'll get rid of the horizon panoramas here. Once I'm here at Saturn, I can roll it around. I can make the rings disappear and put the edge on. As I said, you get a little bit of a fisheye lens distortion. I've got all these moons making it very busy looking, so I can go to the labels and turn off the planet moon labels. And I can go down to my Saturn on the right, and I could manually put a check mark in each of the main moons to show them. And I could also draw the orbits of the main moons and show them. And I can just view this, the Mars system, the Saturn system. I'll just get myself a little bit further away. And you'll also notice that when you're using this index on the right, if you put your cursor to the left of the circle, a slider shows up. So you can grab that dot inside the slider and you can manually increase the size of any object. All right, I'm going to click on home and stop there. So what I thought I'd do is I'll spend about 10 minutes on the lessons. And then if you want to have a quick break, we can do that. All right, so the Sky Guide. The Sky Guide contains a list or an index, a repository of built-in lessons that have scripted material that any teacher can use and you don't need to be a subject matter expert in order to use the lessons. But with the knowledge that I've already shown you, you're going to be able to take those lessons and do even more with them than they are as designed. So on the top of the Sky Guide, you've got a left and right arrow. You've got a house, a picture of a house, which the arrows are used to take you through the pages of the lesson back and forth. The house is used to take you to the top of the Sky Guide here. The curly arrow is a reload the page. So if you've doctored up a scene, you can reload the image so that it sets it back to where it was. And then there's a remove all slides button. So some of the lessons will have you bring up slides on the dome and you can use that button to turn them off. So each of the icons in this folder, oh, and by the way, there's a big A, little a for the size of the font. So if you need bigger fonts, you can do that. So each of these symbols is a folder that you can pop open. The primary, secondary, and advanced lessons are just filled with lessons that are core curriculum. They're written to the NGSS teaching standards. The teachable moments and the Starlab digital cylinders are addition to those. So if I click on the primary lessons, you've got 4 to choose from: night and day, going to the phases of the moon, finding a way around the sky, constellations, and star lore. Now I should say that the Starry Night software and the Layered Earth software do not require the internet for them to function. Everything's stored locally on the laptop. But each of the programs will do a little bit more if you attach the laptop to a network. So for example, you're going to see it in a moment that there's actually an additional lesson available as long as your laptop's on the network. But for now, we've got these 4 lessons into primary. To use a lesson, you're going to mouse over its title and click. That's going to bring up a guiding question covered in that lesson, key concepts that will be addressed, and then a set of steps to the lesson. Click Introduction to begin. And that will bring up the sky it needs to show you in order to teach the lesson. And here you can see we've got a script. So good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to our West Virginia State University Planetarium, a special place that allows us to show what happens in the sky, etc., etc. When you see the white text, that's a cue for you to stop and ask this question to the group. So this is saying, hey, everybody, find the moon in the sky and point to it. Now on the Zoom, it may not be all that easy to see. The moon is down here. Now, because you're now Starlab users, you know that you can point at the moon and click on it, show its label if you want to, or summon information or magnify it, whatever you want. You can intervene with the lessons in whatever way you like, but with the knowledge that I've given you. All right, when you're done this page of the script, you can click Next. That's going to take you to the next page, and it's going to reset the view again. And now it's asking you to do an action. It wants you to press the Runtime Forward button. The time will automatically stop on October 17th or after 1 week. And as the days are passing, you're going to ask the following questions. So, whoops, let me just do this again. My laptop's not used to doing Starry Night at the same time as a Zoom call, so just bear with a little bit here. There we go. So action is to press the runtime forward button. That's that right pointing arrow I mentioned above. And what that's going to do is it's going to take the moon, the first quarter moon in the sky, and it's going to rotate through 7 days of the lunar month, day and night. And as that's happening, the students are going to be observing the moon and answering the following questions. So there's a question, and then there's a square bracket. That's the expected correct answer. So question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, and so on. I'm not going to do the whole, I'm not going to wait for it to run through the whole week, but after 1 week, you're going to end up with a full moon. And if you're done the Q&A before the simulation's finished, you can click on the blue reset the scene, and you end up where you need to get to, the full moon in the sky. The next step is to press the runtime again, and now you're going to have a kind of analysis of what happens after the moon is full, following nights. So the moon will wane in phase and the other things that happen. So that's, you can see it's very straightforward. When you're done this page of the lesson, you click next. Now we're dealing with a view of the spherical moon in the sky with a point source illuminated by the sun, and the observer's position with respect to those other two will give you the illuminated phase of the moon. So I'm not going to do the whole thing. I just gave you a kind of a taste of that one. I'm going to click home to reset the view. I'm going to click the house picture to get back to the top. I'll go into the secondary school lessons. The secondary school lessons are designed for the upper grade levels, middle and upper grade levels. Here we've got a change of seasons. So the software has the ability to draw the ecliptic on the sky and the celestial equator. And it'll talk about how the sun's location along the ecliptic and the tilt of the Earth's axis produces the seasons. It's all in there. There's a lesson devoted to solar and lunar eclipses in general. There's an overview of the solar system lesson. There's a tour of the planets. There's the motion of the planets. And by the way, if you click on the lesson, you're going to see a preview of what's in it. So here's where you're going to find retrograde motion and heliocentric versus geocentric and things like that. And then you've got meteors, asteroids, and comets. And I'd like to share with trainees that you're welcome to take the lessons and adjust them to different grade levels. And in fact, there's actually a resource I'm going to share here on the Starry Night website. So if you go to starlab.com/welcome, it may ask you to type in the password Starlab. Once you do that, you're going to see this page. If you click on the manuals tab and scroll down a little bit, there's a teacher's manual. Click download here. And this will bring up a 118-page PDF with support for all the lessons in Starry Night. So we just did the moon phase lesson. Here it is, lesson 2. You've got an NSCS connections and background, pre-visits to the dome activities, the lesson itself, a high school extension of the lesson, and then post-visit activities as well. So that's available for all the lessons in the Starry Night program. That's available to you. What I like to do though, when I'm dealing with, say, very little children, preschoolers, grade 1, I'll take this welcome to the neighborhood lesson and I'll adapt it by using the visuals inside it and share my own information or maybe answer their questions. So let me just wait for this to catch up here. Here we go. So for example, I'm going to go to the planet Mercury here. And by the way, when you see these simulations, you can always try clicking the play button and see if they'll animate, and this one will. So it says, click here to view Mercury up close. So there's Mercury sitting in space. Kids will think that's the moon, but we can explain why it's not. And then we can do much more with these planets than I've already shown you. For example, you go on up to that options menu that I talked about here, click on it. There's a section in this down here called solar system, which if I expand that, there's a subsection called planets and moons. If I expand that, then you can see here that there's a switch for surface guides. If I turn that on, I'm going to get the moon, the planet's equator in red, the prime meridian, and the poles, North and South Pole. I've also got, a half illuminated planet because the sun is off in the distance. but maybe I want to see the whole planet. I can go in here and I can switch off the dark sides. Now I've got the whole globe illuminated, and I can talk about those permanently shadowed craters at the North Pole of Mercury that still have ice in them. Things like that. I'm not going to do every planet, but I am going to go off to Venus next. Again, I can bring on the surface guides. I could also, don't forget, I can't roll it around because I'm viewing Venus from the ground in Toronto, but I could right-click on Venus, get the surface image model, and look at the Venus Magellan radar map of the surface. Or right-click surface image model, topography, or gravity, or whatever other data set is in the software. And last up, one more I'm just going to show at Mars. And I'm going to go to this, click here to do Valles Marineris. And these alternate views of Mars are amazing because we've got things like Mars Ancient Ocean Shaded, showing where the low-lying areas that would have the water in them are. Or right-click surface image model. Here's a Mars geology map. You can see all the different rock types. I'll turn off the dark side, turn on the full globe here. Or surface image model, Viking shaded, much more natural picture. Or surface image model, my favorite, the laser altimeter. You've also got elemental concentration maps for those teaching the upper grades. The Mars's gravity field and magnetic field are in here. Laser altimeter. So you can see things like the big Hellas Basin depression on one side of the planet and the volcanoes on the other side of the planet. And don't forget, you can right-click, open markers and outlines. You could type in the word rover and label where Spirit and Opportunity are. You could type in Mons and label the names of all the mountains on Mars, check all shown, and do things like that. So there's Olympus Mons. So just an example of taking a lesson and doing much more with it and even extending it to maybe upper grade, higher grade levels. All right, I'm gonna reset the scene and go back to the top of the Sky Guide. I'll go into advanced. So advanced lessons would be early college years, AP level perhaps. Here we've got the seasonal constellations. We've got a little bit of astrophysics content in here, life cycles of stars. That's going to bring us into apparent and absolute magnitude, star size and color, supernovae, things like that. And then, so those are the core curriculum. And then we've also got teachable moments. And teachable moments, there are 10 lessons in this list. 10 if you're online. If you're not online, you're not going to see this 2024 total solar eclipse lesson. The 2017 one is built in, but the 2024 might roll out in a future update, or it's available when you're online. You've also got orders of magnitude, which is the size and scale of the universe. 3 lessons on astronomy of the Americas. This will be the American star patterns and the locations that were built with alignments to the sun and the equinoxes and solstices, things like that. By the way, if I go into the evening sky and I go into my options menu and go down to the deep space category, there's a native images switch I can turn on, and that'll draw the drawings, the Native American art. These are used in the lessons, but there's a way of getting them manually as well. I've also got more astrophysics in here as well. So that's the kind of a tour of the main lessons. The Starlab Digital Cylinders lessons, there are some lessons that have been ported over from the old classic Starlab, including a whole lesson on the biological cell, which completely changes the scene in the dome. And then you've got plate tectonics, which is actually covered better in the Layered Earth software. So that's your tour of the built-in lessons. And we've also at the same time created some new lessons and some new material. And I'm not quite finished touching on that. I'll do a little bit more about that before we wrap up, but I'll stop there. Would you like a break? Do you have any questions?
I wouldn't mind a break. I think we're at 2:42, so I think that's a lot of information. It'll give time to people to go to the bathroom or get a cup of coffee or what have you.
Sure. Is 5 minutes enough?
I'm good with 5 minutes. Anybody's welcome to chime in on chat.
All right, sure. Let's pause for about 5 minutes, give or take, and I'll make sure everybody's back in the saddle before we proceed after the break.
Thank you. We'll be back it's 2:42. We will be back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Go. Good. So I will, I know that the eclipse is coming up and folks are excited about that. So I will devote some time to the eclipse as we go in this next little bit. So stand by for that. One last thing that I forgot to mention on the main control panel that does come up from time to time that I use is that at the very left end of the Doctor Who / Back to the Future bar is this word live on my laptop. And on your laptop, Crystal, it's probably blank or it might say off. It only really activates when you've got your projector attached to your second monitor. What this is, it's a toggle switch that switches from live to off and back again. And what it'll do is it'll temporarily freeze whatever's being shown in the dome while you make a change on the laptop. Maybe you want to spin the sky around, spin the direction or something like that, and not make people dizzy. That's not really what I use it for, but what I do use it for is every now and again, you'll look up and the dome will not look the same as the laptop. Maybe you'll be facing the wrong direction or something's a little off. It's just something that is an ongoing development from the creators of the software to improve on. But if you ever see that happen to you, just go ahead and toggle this to off and then back to live, and it should resync them all. So you should be back in business and ready to go.
May I interrupt for a second? As you're talking, when we left off before the break, you were talking about how the solar eclipse 2024, which is something that the majority, I think, of these educators, from what I'm understanding, is very interested in. And you were saying that if you were online, you would see the lesson, but you don't have to be online to operate the Starlab. So my question is how do you know when you're not online other than that? And more importantly, how do you access to be online?
Oh, well, that's just a matter of putting your laptop on your network.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing you need to do to log in with the software or anything special that way. It's that if the laptop you use for the Starlab has been put on your school network, then it'll go and look at that when it boots up and find that extra lesson. I'm not sure whether they'll fold it into an upcoming update where that won't matter if you're online or not. I can't tell you. I'm not part of the development team, but I know that at the moment, as long as I'm online, I do see the 2024 eclipse lesson. If I go offline, then I don't see it. Sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it did.
Okay, great. But I will also coach you a little bit on creating some lesson focused material that you can use that's linked to your location as well, that it wouldn't be in the lesson because it's not custom to your location. So we'll cover that here as we go a little bit. All right. So we've done much of Starry Night. We've done the lessons. There are a couple of other things I want to highlight in the options menu that I have already left open here on the right that I think that a lot of folks would find of interest. And then we'll also use this part of the software to help us set up the projector inside the dome. So first thing I'm going to mention is that if you go to this section called Local View, where I showed you that super ultra secret special list of extra panoramas, below that, a couple lines below that, you've got light pollution shown here as these two buttons. So if I go into the evening, maybe I'll go to 8:52 p.m. Then if I switch on the local light pollution, it'll wash out the Milky Way and the dimmer stars. So it's designed to simulate the overall, damage to the sky from the general light dome over an urban area. So that'll toggle on and off. If I switch on the distant light pollution, it puts a glow on the horizon. So I can use the combination of both. So you've got the ability to configure the software to simulate the effects of the light pollution on your local sky if you want to. The way you do that is you mouse over either one of these, it doesn't matter, and click. Then it brings up a control box. You can dial up and down the intensity of the local, the washout part. And you can also add or subtract sources and where they come from. So it's a little hard to see the writing in here. I've got 2 sources put in. I could use the plus and minus to add more. But if I double click on the first one, you can see it says Port Huron, but I could change this to Charleston. And I guess that's to your east, right? So I could say dial this down to the east and say, is it strong or is it weak? And say, okay. And then I've also got in here a football stadium. I'll put this football stadium maybe in the northwest or something like that and say, okay. And then I'll say, okay. So that's now being configured for your location. To lock that in, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to turn off the light pollution for the moment. It'll still remember the changes you've made. And then you want to use the options, save as default, and save for it to remember them. So when you turn them back on, they'll be correct for your location. Again, if you didn't follow that this time, play it back later in the video and you can kind of follow along there. What else is in here? If I go down to the stars menu, I can bring up an HR diagram. And if I point at a star, I'll just label the star so we can see some of the names of the stars. If I point at a star, its position on the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram gets shown. So we know Betelgeuse is a big red giant star, so it's up to the upper right off the main sequence, whereas Procyon is a main sequence star, Regulus is a main sequence star, Sirius the same, and so on. If I open up the submenu for exoplanets, I can mark all the stars with circles that we know have planets in them, around them. What's that in the chat? HR diagram. Yes, good. I can go down to the star section here. I can put the proper motion vectors for the stars. So that's the drift over time that the different stars have. And the closer stars tend to be larger than the more distant stars. I could mark the stars that are variable, mark the stars that are binary. That's another one. If I turn off the labels for the stars, I'm going a little fast, but that's okay. You can kind of play this back later and follow along. If I open up the constellations section, there's labels, auto-identify, boundaries, illustrations, and stick figures. And the one recommendation I would do on your end when you have time is to expand the auto-identify and set your configuration to off, off, off switch, on, off, off, off. That 3 on here will give you that, drawing of Orion along with the sticks, because whatever options are switched on here are shown when you select a single constellation. Also, if you wanted to change the color of the labels for your constellations, you could turn them on, go into the change font and use the color selector, the colored pencil, or whatever you happen to have done for the horizon labels. It's all the same sort of procedure to do that. Last up, a couple more things. I mentioned deep space. I mentioned the native images under deep space. You've also got the ability to sort, identify the deep sky objects, and you could have the different types of objects. You could have the different source catalogs, so Messier and NGC, depending on what you're working with. So all of that's available in the software as well. Most people I teach don't need to know too much about that, but you're a higher grade level, so you might want to use that. And last up, the sky surveys, or actually second last. I got one more after this. So the sky surveys allow you to take the visible sky and convert it to another wavelength. So if I change the sky to say August, we all get that beautiful Milky Way in the summer sky, late night. I can take the visible Milky Way with the dark dust lanes obscuring much of the stars and convert the entire sky to infrared. That brightens up the Milky Way. Or I could turn on the galactic dust distribution map as well. And you'll look around, you can see the knots of gas correspond to some of the famous bright galaxies, famous bright nebulae that we see in the night sky. or if I turn those off, I can turn on the Planck cosmic microwave background map of the universe, the temperature map of the universe in microkelvin. So that's in here as well. And just last up, just reverting back to the star section for a second. So just below the HR diagram, the Milky Way, if I click on the Milky Way entry here, I can take the Milky Way and make it brighter or dimmer. And I can do that temporarily or lock it in at a different brightness. But I can also change it from visible spectrum to hydrogen or infrared or gamma ray or X-ray, whatever I want. So that's available to you as well. By default is the visible spectrum. All right. Let me click on home. So let me talk, what's in the chat here? Let's see. Let's make sure I've discovered. Great. Okay, let's talk a little bit about configuring your dome, setting up your projector inside the dome, and how that would all work. So what I'm going to do is open up another web page. This is the Starlab help.screenstep live web page, and there's a tab here called Setup and Teardown. Help one on that one. Go into projector presentation setup. So once you've got your dome inflated and positioned where you want it to be, you're going to roll your projector case inside the dome and park it in what you guess to be the center of the dome. I like to set mine up so that this is a rectangular cross section to this cage. I like to set this cage up so that the long axis of this projector is pointing towards the zippered doorway. And by doing it that way, you're sitting here facing this projector, you're farther away from the blower, and so away from that noise. And you've also got a clean, unbroken span of the dome beyond the projector across from you as the presenter. So inside the bottom of the case is a trap door at the bottom. That's where you're going to store typically the laptop, the HDMI and power cables, the remote for the projector, Bluetooth speaker, the cables for these as well, and then a battery operated light. I don't typically operate with this light on when I'm in the dome, but it is handy to have a light when you're setting up and tearing down. What I do have operating in my dome when I'm presenting is I bought one of those rechargeable LED moon globes, and I have it turned to a minimum setting. I usually turn it to blue or some maybe red, some night sky friendly color. So this is the setup. You've got your fisheye lens above the projector sticking upwards. So you're going to connect everything up, turn on the power switch. You can use the remote for the projector or use the power on button on the side of the projector. If your projector ever experiences any kind of a power glitch or brownout or something like that, it has circuitry that will automatically keep it safe and power it off. If it stubbornly won't power back on, it's because it needs a few minutes to reset itself and decide it's safe. So, you'll get say an orange button or something, an orange button glowing. So if you're pressing on, and the projector won't come on, it's because it's felt a fault in the power signal, and it just wants a few minutes to rest before it'll power back up, and then it should be fine. So give it 4 or 5 minutes and try again. The lens is one of the most expensive components of your Starlab system, so you really want to take good care of that. And to put the lens cap on and off, you're going to be pushing it straight down. You're going to be lifting it straight off. You don't need to unscrew it in any way. Now that lens will get dusty. And so what I use on my Starlab is a very clean microfiber cloth, and I just gently wipe the dust free of it. Now, I also like to coach, if I've got young kids in the dome, I like to coach them to stay away from the lens. They always want to, like moths to a flame, they want to go to the lens and make shadow puppets and, touch it. So that's something you want to also use if you can clean the lens off if somebody inadvertently puts a fingerprint on it. All right, connect your laptop to this system, and then you're going to go and start up Starry Night and fire it up. And the first thing you're going to notice is that this horizon line projected inside the dome will not be level, almost will never be level, the same height in every direction. So that's step number one, is to get that horizon level in every direction. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to the top of the projector. You're going to pop open the hatch on the side of the projector, and these two knobs control the tilt of the lens. The lower ring on the top of the projector is for the zoom amount. So the zoom amount will control where the image begins off the ground. So you're going to get the image level in every direction, the same height in every direction. Then you're going to tweak the zoom to get that to be about 2.5 feet. That might mess up the leveling a little bit. So just go back and forth a couple of times until you're happy with that. The upper ring here is the focus for the projector. So you've got your zoom, your focus, and your tilt. And that's all we need on that page. So at that point, you've got your horizontal level. Now you're going to go into your options menu, and at the top, open up guides, look for the Alt as guides, and switch on the grid. And you can actually save this scenario as a favorite called setup. And all you need to do is search for setup in the search bar, and it'll pop up and you can click on it. This grid is symmetric around the zenith. So if you point a light at the ceiling, you'll see that there's a round piece of fabric sewn into the dome of the dome, and the circle of fabric and the grid need to be concentric. That'll tell you that the lens is under the center of the dome. If these are not concentric, then you're going to grab the cage, the projector box, and just tug it a few inches to or fro until you get the two lined up. Once you've got those lined up, I recommend pausing time, switch to nighttime, use the letter K to bring up the constellations, and do a final focus. When the projector is in focus, you should see the tiny pixels forming the lines and labels in the software. When you're done that, you click on Home, and you're ready to start presenting. Any questions on any of that? It's all recorded, so you'll be able to watch it back if that wasn't clear. All right, last up with Starry Night, I want to talk about the favorites library. So we've already built some of the favorites. And to get to the favorites library, you can either find the word favorites in the menu under Explore Starry Night. You could also click on the hamburger in front of the search field and find them there. You can also find options in here as well. Or you could go up to the word favorites in the drop-down menu and click on Show Favorites. And that's going to bring up this list. I'll just close it and simplify it here. So under the main heading favorites, you've got app favorites, bracket read only. Then you've got user favorites. So anything inside the read only line is already on your laptop. You've already got these delivered to you under Starry Night. The user favorites are the ones that you add to or build on as you use the system over time. The read-only ones include different flavors of simulations. So we've got images. I'll expand the list of images here. Let me just open up the chat, review here what's going on here. Quick setup sheet. Okay, I'll leave that to you folks. Great. So the images are slides that you can bring up on the dome. Every title has a play button and a stop button. So if I wanted to say navigating with the Big Dipper, I click the play button and it shows up on the dome. By the way, every one of these has an arrow pointing to it. If you click on the arrow, it opens up a controller for that slide. You can vary the position of the slide in the dome by sliding the altitude button, the azimuth button, the width makes it bigger and smaller. I can take the azimuth, I could drag this halfway across this line and put that slide on the other side. And that allows me to bring up another slide. So I can fill the entire dome with slides by altering where they're positioned on the dome. When I'm done with a slide, I can click the box to put it away, or I could click the eraser icon above the Y in Sky Guide, and that puts it away. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. All right, very good. That's the images. And by the way, you can add your own images to the software, which I'll show here in a minute or two. The movies let you play movies in a little window on the side of the dome. There are loads and loads of movies loaded in the software already. So if I open up the Starry Night Presents list, you're going to see a number of different titles. And by the way, just as with the other titles, I did this before. If you right click and reveal, it shows you where those live on the laptop. So there's the directory where those movies live on the laptop. So to play a movie, you click the play button. You can click again to pause and resume. If you open up the menu in front of it, it'll give you the duration of the movie. It'll also let you vary the location on the dome, make it bigger and smaller if you wish to. When you're done with the movie, you can click the stop button and that puts it away. Only one movie per instance at a time. Finally, we've got the simulation library. The simulation library is organized by topic level. You can even search for keywords and it'll bring up where that keyword is used in the various simulations. So if I were to say go into Earth, Moon, and Sun, I've got eclipses. I've got lunar and solar. If I click on solar, then I've got a set of 5 to choose from here. If you see the titles abbreviated or truncated, go up to the top and grab that little column divider and drag it to the right and make it longer, make it wider. The little green eye is a toggle that you can open up a note about that simulation. So that'll toggle that open and closed. To run a simulation, just as before, you point at it and left click, and it'll play that simulation on the dome. You can always take these simulations and improve on them, annotate them. I can go to the labels, planets and moons, and I could add the planet and moons. This one came up paused, but I can hit play and animate it. Now you'll notice on my laptop, I'm getting a little bit of a jerky motion, but on the dome, it's smooth. It's just another quirk of the software. I'm just going to help this along by clicking the minutes up here. So when I get to the totality, I can stop time. I can talk about the different features that we're seeing. And by the way, if I have the sun centered or the moon centered, I can go ahead anytime. I can change this to 2024. I can change this to April. And then a bit later in the day, what time? Let's see. Let this catch up to me a little bit here. So 3 p.m. Not sure what time the eclipse is for you. Here we go. April 8th. Let's go back. My laptop's not behaving right now with all the Zoom I'm doing at the same time. Let me just reset that, open that up. You can always right click and open it again, and that'll reveal it again. And then once you're there, you can always also expand out as well. A really good one is the solar eclipse from the sun. And again, I like to change the Earth's surface by right-clicking the surface image model of the Earth to natural Earth. I like to add the labels. Start it running. So this is the March 2006 eclipse, but if I pause it, I should be able to set this to 2024. April 8, around 1500 hours. Oops. 2024. Apologize, my laptop doesn't want to behave. You could set it to April 8th, 2024. Then you could save it, file, save a copy, and title it April 8th, 2024 Eclipse from the Sun and add it to your library. I'll give this one more try. There we go. Set it running. So that's the upcoming eclipse. And you'd say file, save a copy as, we'll retitle it April 8, 2024 solar eclipse from the sun and save. And if you wanted to right click and mark Charleston, you could do that as well. A couple of other favorites in here under the moon. You've got the moon flyby. This is a terrific one. An eagle has landed, showing you recreating the lunar surface. If you go down to the space exploration, you've got things like visit the space station, and you can roll the space station around. You can speed time up a little bit. You can zoom in and out. You've also got all the Apollo, Cassini, Voyager, Galileo, Mars Express, New Horizons, all those missions are in here. Over time, I expect the developers to add in more content around Artemis and those sort of events as well. So I'm just going to share with you a couple of the simulations that I've made to inspire you to the sorts of things that you can do as well yourselves. So you'll see under user favorites, I've got my West Virginia State U, but I've also got my folder called Starry Night Faves. So for example, I made a whole lesson around Harry Potter where I put numerals in front of each one so I knew what order to click them in. So 01, Harry Potter's birthday, that's July 31st, 1980. I think she picked that date because the bright planets were up in the sky that night. Then we can have a dialogue with the students about which constellation would each house of Hogwarts have had. So I postulate that Leo would be Gryffindors and Hydra would be Slytherins. And then you've got the characters that get their names from celestial objects such as Sirius, the dog star, and so on. So this is recorded. You can you can borrow my work and see what I've done and replicate that if that's of interest to you. I've also got a whole lesson around Galileo. So what I did is I took us to northern Italy on January 7th of 1610. Recreated the sky Galileo had when he was having his lunch. We can go into the evening sky. Then we can right click on Jupiter and magnify Jupiter. I'm just going to adjust the scaling a little bit here to come back out. There we go. So get all the moons. So here's what's great. You can add your own slides in. So there's a slide of Galileo that I dropped in. There's the telescope instrument that he used, only about a 1-inch aperture instrument. And my favorite is Galileo's sketchbook. So I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it. Hopefully this works. So Galileo's handwriting. He wrote 7th of January, 1610, Giove, which is Latin for Jupiter. Tres stelle file con, 3 little stars with, and then he drew this drawing. It's too bad I can't get this a little bit bigger. Let's see if I can. So you drew star, star, Jupiter, star, 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 Jupiter, star. And of course, you could change the date, illustrate how he came back every night and looked at it again, made more notes, and eventually deduced that those were moons orbiting the planet. You could take the students to the North Pole on Christmas Eve, put Polaris at the zenith, and as the Earth rotates, then everything revolves around it. If you want to see the sun, you would have to wait till the first day of spring, which is March 24th or 5th or so here. There's the sun peaking above the horizon. So I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions or comments, and then we'll move on to playing full dome movies and getting into the layered Earth. Let me look in the chat, see what people are saying. Yeah, information about teacher's manual. Harry Potter. Excellent. Yes, if you go to the help menu in Starry Night, you've got the user's guide and companion book as linked that'll come up on your laptop. All right, excellent. I think we'll shut this down. So you'll have been given a sampler of full dome movies on your MacBook. There'll be a folder on your desktop. Click on that. I've got more than you'll have because you'll over time you'll have as many as I do as you collect them over time. You can see that I've got little orange cones beside each of these icons because the folks in Yulee, Florida have associated the video player with the VLC media player. And that has a nice function where if you've got the two screens, then when you ask for full screen, it puts it on the dome and fills the dome. If for whatever reason that never worked for you, what you can do is right-click on a video title, open it with QuickTime. In the MacBook, it's going to be QuickTime. Then you're going to want to make the QuickTime window smallish, because when it's small like this, you can drag it off the laptop and onto the dome. And once it's on the dome, you'll be able to see the play button and all the components. If you leave the window too large, the corners will disappear off the edge of the dome and you won't find them. So once it's visible on the dome, you can click play, full screen, it'll fill up your dome as a full dome movie. Again, that image will start about, a foot or two or three above the ground. It seems to me that these full dome movies, they fill up the dome a little bit more than the Starry Night software does. If you get a GoPro camera, you can actually produce your own content in your Starlab. This happens to be a field trip to the zoo where somebody put the GoPro 360 in with the giraffes. And then there are various commercial available movies. This one, Back to the Moon for Good, is narrated by Tim Allen. I believe it's a public domain, and you'll have it on your laptop as well. You'll see in here I've got things like Apollo 11 countdown and launch and Neil Armstrong first steps. So you can actually start on the ground, right-click and ask to go to the moon. And while you're doing that, you can have the Apollo countdown audio playing and have the liftoff correspond to you lifting off the Earth. That's a lot of fun. All right, let's talk about YouTube. So if you do have your laptop attached to the internet, then it can play YouTube content in your dome. And you've got a couple of choices. As you saw with the black hole movie, you can play any video in your dome on a section of the surface. It can be a regular rectangular movie that you play on one side of the dome. But you can also find full dome content on YouTube as well. And the key there is to search using the term full dome or fisheye, and then add something extra like Aurora. And then you're going to look for the thumbnails that are the black rectangles with a circular image inside, like this one. This is one of my all-time favorites. I use it almost every single time I'm in the dome. Aurora Lights of Wonder trailer by Chul Kwan. It looks amazing in the dome. And the way this would work is you'd select the video you want. You would take the browser window and make it compact, a little bit compact. Drag the browser window off the laptop and put it on the dome. Once there, then you press play, full screen, and it'll fill up your dome. This is about a 2.5-minute video, and it's just outstanding. Now, you may have noticed at this top there that I actually had a curated playlist of some of my favorites. We'll go back to that here. So this is my kind of favorite playlist at the moment. There's a biology one called Cell, Cell, Cell. It's a little PG, so you want to review that before you show it. There's Charles Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle, which is a great one. There's a Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon planetarium show trailer in fisheye, which is nice. And then this Space Station Fisheye Fly Through 4K Ultra HD is my all-time favorite at the moment. It's actually not a full dome movie, it's a fisheye movie. But in the dome, it's amazing. It's about 20 minutes long, but really the first 4 or 5 minutes are the best. But you'll literally feel like you're there. So that's my advice on full dome movies. It's pretty straightforward. Any questions, comments? Everybody happy? All right. All right, let's switch horses now and go into the Layered Earth software. The Layered Earth software is a little bit of longer in the tooth than the Starry Night program. I believe there's an update for this coming in the near future, so look out for that. And this one works much the same. Things are arranged a little bit differently than the Starry Night Small Dome, but it's made by the same folks, so you'll see lots of similarities to it. So instead of a panel on the left and a panel on the right, everything is located on the left side of the screen. The search bar is still in the upper right, however. The main window is this big, dark, starry circle that you're seeing me circling with my mouse. The Earth is in it. So the Earth is the focus of this software package. It's geology, geography, or social studies, earth sciences in general. On the top, under File, and on the MacBook, it's going to say TLE, Layered Earth Small Dome. You'll click that. You've got, again, the option to export the screenshot and export the movie, just as you did before. The buttons along here let you manipulate the Earth in the view. You can zoom in and out on the Earth. You can tilt the Earth to the left and the right. You can pitch the Earth higher and lower in the dome. And you can migrate the Earth east, west, north, south, or reset the scene. Now the pitch button, the pitch will only take the edge of the Earth to the center of the dome, the peak of the dome. But I don't use these buttons. I use my mouse because I can point at the Earth and drag and roll the Earth around just as I could in Starry Night. And if I want to make the Earth higher, I can right-click and drag the Earth higher up. Now, the left-hand panel serves there's sort of 5 sections or 5 things that you can have shared on this left-hand panel. The Earth Guide is where you find the built-in lessons. There's a product tour and student lessons, and those are 7 main topic areas: the solid Earth, plate tectonics, rocks and minerals, Earth-shaping processes, earthquakes, volcanoes, and geological time. The lower half of this panel, which, by the way, you can balance the amount of real estate used, can either be the search results, a layers tab, or a labels tab. And if you want to devote the entire column to the lesson, you can go on up to the top where it says view, and you can hide whichever one has the word hide in front of it and devote the entire column to the lesson. When you click on the lesson folder, slight difference from Starry Night, you also have a pre-lesson evaluation or quiz that you can do with the students, where you ask them to agree or disagree with a number of statements. When you're done asking them this, you go back to the lesson and dive in. Earth is a system. Guiding questions, key concepts. The view will show you what you need to see. And when you dip into the lesson A1-1, you've got your scripted material. Now, instead of the bold and the faint text, you've got basically questions are set out sort of separately like this. You've got green text that you can mouse over for definitions of the glossary. In this case here, it's talking about light pollution, and there's a sort of side trip here with a number of questions to ask the students and the option to reveal the answers to the teacher. You've also got blue hyperlinks that take you on side trips. So click here to see a good example of light pollution. That just zooms in on the Earth. Now, I don't know why they focused on France. We'll just roll it over and focus on, our neck of the woods. When you're done the page, you'd go down to the bottom and click next there. and it jumps to the next page of the lesson. Just a Starry Night, very, very similar to that. So you can see we go on and on through the lesson. As you can see, we've got the Earth can be annotated with the different circles, just as we could annotate the sky in the Starry Night. All right, and I'm going to click the little house to go back to the top here. Now, the lower section, if I go to the search pane, for example, I can reset the scene here. I can go up to the search bar and I can type in Charleston, enter. And that should give me a list of places on the Earth with that name in it. So Charleston, West Virginia comes up first. If I double click that, the software is going to zoom in on that part of the Earth. The more you zoom in, the more details you see, kind of like the Google Earth idea. And the internet will even add some additional detail to the map, although it's not required. So you can see your mind slowly kind of populating the map tiles on the scene. Now, when you're here, you can click and drag and reorient. You can still zoom in and zoom out. You can get right down to individual buildings and streets. And if you use the right click, you can get a more of a bird's eye view looking down. You can also right click and ask to look north, which kind of better assists navigation. It's more of a Google Earth kind of an approach. Other options in here are to orbit around the Earth and come back to this location, or rotate around where you basically fly almost like a circling aircraft. Now, this is a great way of actually adding more Earth science content that's customized to your area, because you can take a regional view of your part of the world. Let me just look north again here. And this is where the layers section comes in. So if I go down to the layers mode, I've got different categories of material or data sets that I can paint around the Earth. If I were to say, go down to rocks and minerals and expand that, then I can put a check mark in any of these data sets and paint those onto the Earth. So I can put on the Earth's crustal thickness. Let me just zoom out to give us a bit more context here. Or I could switch that to the gamma ray dose, or the geological age of the rocks, or the rock types. And there are legends that show up on the side of the dome. Soil types, wind erosion, things like that. So you've got that ability. We could also take the Earth and we can paint it up with things like under human, the city lights, political boundaries, population density. Don't worry about the patchiness. It will fill in when you're using the software for a minute or two here. Or I could go into the, say, where's my plate tectonics? Expand that. I could draw the tectonic plates. I could draw the boundary motion along the plates, the arrows for those, and so on. So I've got lots and lots of data sets that I can customize and build new lesson material by bringing up those data sets. I'm just going to hit reset here. Another thing you can do is you could go to the favorites library. So we've already used the favorites library in Starry Night. This is organized slightly differently. Now it's got the built-in favorites on the lower part of the list and the ones you add to the upper part of the list. To add your own content to the list at the top, you mouse in that section and right click, and you can add a new folder. You can open the folder. If I open that folder up, and I'll come back to this in a moment. Now, in terms of the built-in favorites, again, as before, lots of different content under different categories. So if I want to talk about the Earth's interior, of course, this is mentioned in the lessons, but if you want to do it manually, you can as well. So Earth's interior with the labels, I'll just double click on that. And that gives me the cutaway view of the interior of the Earth. If I want to talk about the compression and shear waves that pass through the Earth and how the impact of those allow us to analyze the structure of the Earth, we've got that. Shadow zone, and so on. If I go to Earth's landforms, then I can take visits to all of these different sites. So if I wanted to say, go to Mount St. Helens, then I'm going to get a three-dimensionally rendered view of Mount St. Helens, as you can see here. Or another example, if I go to, now my laptop is giving me a little problems, but if I go to the earthquakes, there's a historical earthquakes, which gives you a color-coded set of dots around the earth. And every dot, if you mouse over it, will give you the date, the depth, and the magnitude of that earthquake. Now, my laptop, for whatever reason today, is not showing me the dots, but I am still getting the information. As you can see here, I'm mousing around. Now, one of the really terrific, my favorite parts of the Layered Earth software is the live earthquake feed option. This has a link to the US Geological Survey if your laptop's online, and you'll get a pulsing dot if there's an earthquake happening somewhere. All right, there we go. New Guinea. So I'll zoom in here. If I mouse over it, it's telling me it's a magnitude 4.8 tremor west of Tual, Indonesia, at a depth of 100 kilometers below the surface. And again, this will have the dots as well. I'm just not showing them all the dots today. If I go into geological time, there's an animation here of the Earth at different eras. If I go to the extinction of the dinosaurs, it gives me the era at that point. Let's see, what else is here? Same for volcanoes. And by the way, if I go to volcanoes, I'll bring up the Ring of Fire. So it shows you the Ring of Fire. And then you could plot up the world volcanoes. Again, my dots aren't showing today, but you can go down to the volcanoes section below, expand that, and you can see that there is a settings button. There you go. There you can see my volcanoes are showing right now. I can open up the settings and I can actually winnow the types of volcanoes down to the different types if I wish to. How's my time? We're pretty good. All right, so let me just share a couple of the favorites that I've created. One of my favorites here is under geophysics. If I go to the Earth's crustal magnetic field, this gives us the magnetism of the rocks on the seafloor and the polarization of the magnetic field as the rocks solidified under different magnetic pole reversals of the Earth. If I start with this and I go down to my plate tectonics, I can add the plate boundary motion, which gives me the spreading center at the mid-Atlantic ridge. I can also mouse around and look at the different directions the different parts of the Earth's crust are moving. And if I go down to my geophysics section here, I can switch on the Earth's magnetic field dipoles as well. And then I produce some other combinations. For example, there's my house as an example. I've got live earthquakes and strain rate and plate. So I've got the plate boundary arrows. I've got the strain rate on the Earth's crust. And if I go back to New Guinea there, or Indonesia, we should see that earthquake happening at a place of higher strain on the Earth's surface. So I'll pause there if anybody has any questions. I think you'll find it's very straightforward. We're good? Excellent. All right, well, what we'll do is I'll wrap up with a little lesson on putting your dome away, and then we can see if there are any final thoughts anyone has. And at that point, you're going to be keen to get going on your dome. What's the chat? Here we go. This is so awesome. Yeah, it is awesome. I love it. All right, cool. Here we go. So now, in terms of the power coming into the dome, you've got an extension cord that needs to come in and power up the projector. And that means there's going to be an extension cord in the dark on the floor. And then some people tape the cable to the floor. Some people are lucky enough to have an outlet in the middle of the floor. And my solution was to grab a piece of floor runner. So it's a 3 by 8 foot floor runner. I just put my extension cords under it and I pinch it under the corner of the projector. You can see I'm pulling the whole projector and the floor runner and the cable out. My cabinet's a little bit, my case is a little bit different from yours, not to worry. But at this point, what I've done is I've put away my projector, my laptop, my cables. I have packed everything away and I just lift the side of the dome up and roll the case out. So now my dome is completely empty. I've still got my fan running. I've gone in and I've closed the vents at the back. And I'm just clearing the decks here to let me deflate. Now, personally, to keep my dome in great shape, I don't really like to just collapse my dome onto the floor because we've had people traipsing in and out of the dome all day. There might be dirt on the floor. You've got this beautiful projection fabric inside your dome. So maybe you would prefer that not to settle on the dusty floor. So the solution that I've come up with is to collapse the dome onto itself so that the front half of the dome that you're looking at ends up laying on top of the rear half of the dome, which lands on the gym floor. So what I'm doing now is I'm going inside the dome. If I'd had a helper, what I would have done is I would have zipped the door shut and told them to turn off the fan. At this point, the fan's still running and the door's still open. But I'm lifting up the back of the dome. So I'm grabbing the back of the dome between the two vents, and I'm dragging that rear half of the dome towards the door. Now, ideally, what I should have done is zip the short door shut and crawled underneath, but I didn't. In this case, I struggled my way through the door, as you'll see. I'm still holding on to the back half of the dome off the ground. And then I'm going to turn off the fan. And then I'm going to zip the door shut. So I would have changed the order if I was doing the recording again. Then I'm going to walk around the back of the dome and look for that round piece of fabric I mentioned at the top of the dome and pull it straight back and down. And that's going to lift the front half of the dome and lay it on top of the rear half of the dome the best I can. If I'd done it more symmetrically, I would have had the door right in the middle here where the green line is, but I was a little bit off that day. Just lift the corner up to let the air out. And just start spreading it out. You're going to end up with that big 2 layers of fabric in a semicircle on the floor again, the way we had at the beginning. So disconnect the air tube and Velcro it onto itself. Just initially, just lay that kind of on the doorway and then get the fan out of the way. Now, I don't know if you have a policy at your end. I have tried to have folks take their shoes off when they're in my dome just to save the wear and tear on the fabric, but not everybody feels that way, so it's up to you. But that's one policy I've used to keep my dome in shape for years. So what I'm doing is I'm lifting up the front of the dome now and looking for the rear of the dome that I can pull forward. There I go. And I'm going to spread that out to the side. And then do a little organizing of the doorway here just to get the bottom half out. Yeah. So the fabric will be a bit bunched up if you want to go around and kind of settle things and tidy things a little bit. Square up the door, put the Velcro strap across the opening. And I'm going to put the air tube a little nicer on there. Then I'm just going to go around and drag it out, kind of flatten it out a little bit better, unbunch it a little bit more. You won't get rid of the wrinkles, but you'll get it a little flatter and smoother. So then we're going to do a little more smoothing out. Then we're going to take one of the corners we made and drop it right into the middle above the door. By folding it up this way, you'll always know where the door will be when you unfurl it. Okay, then I'm going to grab the other corner and do the same. You'll notice I try not to walk on the dome either with my shoes on. This is going to generate a big triangle on the floor now, fabric. All right, now I'm going to take the new corners I've made and bring them into the middle. Now I can see my dome has now become a long triangle. Now, if you have a larger, a 6 or 7 meter dome, your next step will be to fold this wide end in thirds. Me, I'm going to do it in half because I have a 5 meter dome. Then I'm going to start with the thin end and start rolling up towards the front here, just squeezing as much of the air out as I can without being too aggressive on that. Starts getting a little heavy towards the end here. All right. Now we'll go off and get our straps and our bag. So I don't disconnect the buckles in my straps. I just loosen them and then slide them over the end again when I'm ready. You want the metal side facing away from the dome fabric, and you want to make it snug, but not overly tight. Again, you don't have this thin blue bag that I have, but here's the trick. You drape the bag over the dome and just roll it on its back instead of lifting the dome up. Now your dome might not fit in the bag the first time or two, but it'll get there once you get the hang of rolling it up. In my case, I've got enough room left over in there for my extension cords and my stadium chair as well.
We will actually have two duffel bags, one for the dome, then the case, and then the second duffel bag will be the extraneous thing people will need.
Yeah, so in that case, you'll have your projector inside its case, you'll have your fan, you'll have the dome duffel bag and a accessory bag, I guess.
Yes, that was the idea. That definitely was the idea.
So that's all I need to tell you for now. I think you've got information probably pouring out of your ears and everything. So lots of information to take in. I know it was a lot, but once you get in the dome and start trying things, it'll come back to you and you'll see all the great things you can do with the dome. You've got a bit more time left with me for training, so